you'll know the true color of gold.
It seemed like no one ever died of old age, natural death, drinking or some other kind of ailment that got to them. Few got in landslides, tunnels caved in, snake bites, crossing rivers. So it wasn't a place where, you're going to live a long, natural life.
To find what I need to survive, I've got to dig down deep to stay alive. I've got to dig down deep. I use my hands, I use my feet, I use my heart, best place to start. And when I work, I hum a tune till the setting of the sun and the rising of the moon.
Un indio menos, un tamal más. One less Indian, one more tamale. That was death out there, I wasn't like gonna cry about it. One less Indian, one more tamale. They had a lot of good sayings out there. And I used to say, if you run with the wolves, howl like a wolf. Because if you run around with those crazy miners, you had to drink like them, scream like them, act like them, the old boys. And then I said, if you're caught with the wolves, you hang like a wolf.
Heart and soul, blood and tears, friends they come, friends they go. But a pocket full of earth is a pocket full of gold, is a pocket full of gold.
I was born in East Chicago, Indiana in 1940 and was raised on a farm my first years. Very boring. Indiana is one of the boring states that begins with a vowel. Ohio, Indiana, Illinois. Our most famous thing there is corn knee-high by the 4th of July. There was no adventure there. So later in life, after I got back from Korea, I decided I want to do one last little adventure. And I read articles. At that time, we had a magazine called Stoger Shooter Bible. And it had articles about all over the world, people hunting and adventures. And so I read an article in it about Costa Rica, about wild boar everywhere in the country. The farmers would give you horses and guides to go and shoot them. There was wild boar running through the streets of San Jose. And I believe this. So I got two ex-Marine friends of mine, two brothers and my brother, and we bought a 1958 Dodge panel truck. That was at that time was 1964, but we got this old truck for $300. We fixed it up, put bunks in it, and got some spare parts and things, and we took off for Costa Rica. We didn't speak Spanish. We didn't know where we were going, how to get there, what we were gonna do. My brother took Spanish in high school, so he knew 3 or 4 words. And we got to Costa Rica on the 1st of April Fool's Day, 1964. Was when we first got here, and I started traveling then all around the country to know more of it. And I met a mining company actually we're from Florida, and they hired me as an interpreter. I didn't speak any Spanish, but they just spoke less. We always say, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. So I got, since they thought I knew something, I could buff them. They didn't know what the man in Spanish was saying, so I could tell them anything. So I got to we went to the Osa Peninsula. And that was it, 1967, I finally got to the Osa. Well, I wasn't there for those real heydays in the late 30s, early 40s. Yeah, quite a history of, we even heard it used to be a penal colony, the peninsula of Osa. So the criminals were just taken there, and they said dumped off. Like you couldn't get out of there, there was no way to get out. And those are the first actually people that discovered gold. Over Playa Madrigal, they said a jeweler picked up a big seashell punk, and it was washing out, and there was the gold, inside of it, little gold flakes. So that started a gold rush, and it got to Playa Carate and Madrigal. It was they said just covered with miners, the whole coast, because they shoveled it on low tide. They shoveled this thin layer of black sand with gold up high where the next side wouldn't reach it. Then they had the rest of the day to wash that in their sluice boxes, little boxes. They got the gold. Most of them had to use mercury, because it was so fine. But at that beach at that time, planes would land on it, bring in ice and prostitutes and fresh vegetables from San Jose, and taking out the gold and bringing, other people back and forth. Because the town not the town, there was no town. The beach just roared day and night. And the drinking and the fights, I don't know, stuff like that, but it must have been a very wild area. How much they got from that, that pile of dirt was quite, and I've seen it. The first gold I saw over there, this thin layer of black sand, it's the little flakes you see on it, like a butterfly wing. They're so fine that you can't even touch it. It's a smear on your fingers if you ever took a butterfly. So to mine that, you had to have the mercury in the sluice box, because the gold would sink into the mercury, and then you had to burn that amalgam out. As I traveled through the jungle, I always carried a rifle or a pistol. I'd shoot a turkey or a wild boar and I'd give it to whichever house I stopped at, either miner or some of the homesteaders too. So I was welcome in any house out there. I always carried some bag of candy for the kids, so say there was always something to eat along the trail. So there was just game everywhere. Dantos, the tapir, the tepesquintly, any type of animal you wanted was there. At that time, it wasn't illegal to dig up turtle eggs, and so we had all that also, plus plenty of fishing in the mouths of the rivers, the Rio, the Serena, the Rio Claro, and also the herds of wild pigs. Then there were not many people, but I was a hunter, so the gold miners would come to me and they traded their gold for my machete and some 22 shells and different things, and so I started collecting this. I found out I could sell it for a little more in San Jose. And so I started building up a trade like that. And so I bought from a few people, and then more people heard about me in the peninsula. So I traveled to their houses. Some of them, their houses, their ranchos, which were just a thatched roof and open sides. They weren't even enclosed because no one stole from each other. And some of them built an extra bunk in their house. So when I got there, I'd have a place to sleep.
I worked like maybe 10 years. My first 10 years in the Osa Peninsula, looking for gold. And I remember Patricio, he come to Tiger River, to Río Oro, to Carate, and buy the gold. And we work in the river, on the rivers and tunnels. And we make the house in the forest. Yeah, and we have the water, clean water, waterfalls and nice creek for water. And I love the Osa Peninsula, and I live beautiful life. When we live in peace in one place, have everything.
My early days out there was just like the West back in the U.S., because there was no law there, and the law never went there. They were afraid to do these little passes and stuff to get. So the miners out there, they felt safe that they were with their own crowd of people. A lot of them couldn't leave the Osa because they had some of major problems outside for murder and robbery. So there was a lot of the left, what we call it, survivors of the revolution. They weren't put in prison. They were sent to the Osa, and other criminals weren't in jail. They were put out there, and they just lived. It's like Brown's home in Wyoming, back in the old West. No matter what you did on the outside, if you behaved yourself in there, you had no problems. The police from San Jose, which would be the FBI, their FBI, the Oihota, would come to my farm and looking for people, but they never leave my house. They drink with me. I sold liquor illegally, which didn't bother, but they knew it and never bothered me because they said, okay, there was never any trouble at my home. So they would stay there, and they told me, Pat, they said, tell the people, as long as they stay in the jungle, we're not going to go look for them. We can't find them. See, they've imprisoned themselves, They're adding something to society. They're actually producing some gold. They might live with some ex-prostitute, and so they're helping out. They're raising a family. As long as they stay there, they don't have problems. So the people out there, the miners, would rely on me to take letters to their mother or family they hadn't seen maybe in 10, 15, 20 years. I would take messages, and the family then were so happy to know they were still alive. They'd send a little something back to them. So I was sort of the mailman, and I was their communications from their little inside world to the outside world at that time.
Bueno, yo vine en 1937, me trajo mi señor a lavar oro, de estar aquí en Puerto Jiménez, porque vine de 20, casi 20 años, 21, porque yo voy a entrar a 97. Los que vivíamos en el mismo, trabajábamos, pero mi trabajo era aparte. Yo iba y agarraba una palangana y cateaba. El oro que sacaba yo era para mí. Para mí.
The snakes, we'd lose 1 to 3 people a year by snake bites. I mean, some of them died literally instantly. The bushmaster was our worst. There was more fer de lance, which is terciopelo. Most of the bites, even the smallest ones, would kill you, but the larger ones are pretty deadly. The person would go into cold convulsions immediately. You go blind, bleeding out of all your stomach, bleeding out of I've seen people, the sweat comes out of their forehead, red, not pure blood, but reddish everywhere. But I've seen other miners that were bitten, and they literally went blind immediately, and we never got them to Port Jimenez. They died before we got them to Port Jimenez in that short a time. But there's so many snakes out there. It's ungodly, the amount of snakes and the amount of bites that we see.
El culebro. La culebra para mí es el enemigo más grande que tenemos nosotros, los hombres en la montaña. Que eso no le avisa. En cambio usted, un gato lo ve desde que viene allá, que ya él viene haciendo la colita así, usted dice, viene por mí. Ve. La culebra no, la culebra cuando percató usted ya lo tiene agarrado. Y si no se pellizca, mujer o hombre muerto. Y ese es el animal que yo tengo miedo.
We had at that time huge, we call manadas, herds of wild boar. So that was our main thing, that what we call the chancho de monte. We had another pig called a saino, it would be like a javelina, the smaller packs or just in pairs, or we hunt with dogs. And we have to run and run and run after them to finally catch them. They generally hold up, and I'd crawl into the hole with a flashlight so I could see them, and we shot them in the hole. The first time I ever did it, we didn't have a flashlight, so we took a long stick, put some cloth on it, and beeswax to light. So when I crawled in to shoot it, the side blast from a revolver blew out the light, and I had this live wild boar in the hole with me, but he didn't charge. But that was that wasn't fun to do.
Ya, y usted sabe que cuando hay carne y la gente come y no había ley para matar nada. La ley la hacían los hombres. La ley la hacían los hombres. Al que podía más, ese vivía mejor. Sí.
In the old days, there were people here in town or in 14 minutes that gave money to the small pulperias to buy gold for them. And then they sent a man into there to buy it. But there was never anyone that walked through the jungle, house to house. And I walked the whole peninsula. If there was people mining there, I would eventually get there. So I walked constantly just buying gold. I take a different route every time. And the Madrigal beach, there was a few stores, and then people lived in the mouth of Madrigal. That's where the first real gold strike was. They had a small store there. So they had a graveyard is there at Madrigal. So strung along the beach, there was a few houses, but most of your miners lived up into the hills. They lived naturally closer to the little area they were mining. But basically, on the Osa, it was free because as long as they stayed there, they had no problem. So it was just there was so few people and so many animals. We all lived off the jungle, all of us. Anybody that lived out there relied on the jungle to supply the fresh meat. If you worried about anything slipping and falling and drowning, across rivers were knocked off my feet, you know, and I thought, okay, this is it. But if you got to rivers, I thought I could not cross them. I thought, well, I have to get across this. So I'd not dive and I'd walk in until the river knocks you off your feet. So you try to get to the other side where you can touch ground again. But I always made it across the river, which wasn't too smart of an idea. But to be a GoldWalker, you know, you got to walk.
I've got to dig down deep.
I wasn't trying to do conservation in the Osa in the 60s. I was beginning to be a witness of the Osa, but I had to come to Osa as director of the Parks Department with several congressmen who were already investigating the Osa Productos Forestales, a mega corporation. And I could see the peninsula was on fire. Hundreds of holes in the middle of the forest, smoking out, you know, smoke coming out of the farms they were making. Because that first tsunami I lived wasn't the gold miners, it was the settlers, people who were squatting in the Osa Productos Forestales, huge territory here.
The Osa Forestal shot a squatter sometime, so there was a lot of trouble there, and the communists got them stirred up. Communists, they were always big in the southern zone. They got themselves entrenched here, and they had such a vocal group. I was at meetings from before, you know, when they were gonna, the Osa Forestal was kicking out some people and causing trouble. So we had a meeting, and we're gonna get guns, we're gonna fight them, we're gonna kill all the Americans and Germans and this. And I was in the meeting. One of them said, "Well, Pat's American." And they said, "No." They said, "Pat's one of us." I'm one of them. I'm looking at these guys. I thought, my God, if I gone down that low, you know, you guys are all killers and murderers and thieves, and oh, I'm one of you. Okay, you know.
We must strive to tell a story and let history unfold. Tell of farmers slashing, burning our forests to the ground. Some treasures need no mining or cultivating of land. Just take a look around you, it's right where you stand. In the name of yellow wealth, green gold has been forsaken. But the fight to save our resources has only just awakened. And the sun will rise each day with new lessons on the way. Who is right and who is wrong will be decided by those who are strong. Not the laws of the jungle or the land, but by the will of the people who rise up and take a stand. Oh.
In the early 1970s, it also wasn't complete destruction, but it was well on their way to be completely destroyed. And you can't just say, you know, the future of the Osa is agriculture or livestock. No way. When you know what cows do to the land, when you know what pesticides do to the rivers, well, all those things are things in the evolution of humanity that become clearer and clearer and clearer as science develops, as the problems of the planet grow bigger. And you say, well, wait a minute, it's not as we thought.
I am hurt, I am scarred, I will flaunt my ugly slashes to show that I am strong and I will rise out of the ashes. I am beauty, I am nature, I am balance, I am complete. I will fight and I will find all the cracks in man's concrete.
I've lived at that time, I lived in Salsi Puedes, which means get out if you can. That's the name of it. It's a very rough little area and to get out in a boat out through the breakers, That's where they got the name Salsipuedes. So I would walk the beach. I'd leave in the morning, or in the 2 o'clock in the morning. I'd walk down the beach to Carate, Madrigal, and buy the gold from the miners that were mining the beach sand. Because there was very few gold miners. At that time, the price of gold was so low, and there was so much work in the banana company. There was no reason to go in there and live in the damn jungle and pack through the hills and haul in your supplies and sleep, chop wood. So everyone was working for the banana company. The banana company took great care of you. They said the banana company took care of you from the cradle to the grave. From the time you were born, went to work with them, everything they did for you, all their benefits. So the gold miner at that time was sort of a renegade. And there was the farmers out there, that was apart from they weren't really associated with the gold miners. So the miners had a pretty tough reputation too. The problem at that time, the people in San Isidro were selling their farms, and they were buying, they were squatters. They would go into the Osa, the Parque Corcovado. It wasn't a park then, it was just the Corcovado swamps. And they had chainsaws, and they were just clearing, literally hundreds of hectares. Where in the old days, before that, everything was cleared by an axe. All your big farms around 14 minutes, all that land was cleared with axe. There were no chainsaws. So it took so much time, to clean a hectare. All the chopping and work and then putting in your fence lines. But with the invention of the chainsaw and the people that had them, that was just horrible. And they cut every tree there was. There was no preserving the good trees, the good hardwood trees like Cristobal, Cachimba, Ron. Everything was there. They wanted to clear land, pasture, because at that time pasture land was worth more than jungle. They wanted pasture. Horrible.
They just logged the beautiful mahogany forest of the Osa, and once they logged them, waited a little bit, and they put a match to them and burn them, and then comes the corn, and then comes the farm. And it was an eerie feeling back then that, wow, is this possible to save this?
There was areas I wouldn't go for several weeks because I hunted in the Corcovado. There was so much game there, and it was unbelievable. You couldn't even walk through it. There were so many trees that had been fallen, and then they was slash burn. So that you chopped the first part of the dry season, and you had to actually burn before the end of March, and everything went up like just kindling and just. So everything in there died that couldn't get out. Your bigger animals could run and get out, but their habitat was destroyed. If you got rid of the chancho de montes, the peccary, and those animals the jaguar ate, then they've got to go farther in. Then they have to start disturbing the farmers that might have cattle. So the real problem in the before the park was the farmer clearing huge tracts of land.
The Organization for Tropical Studies had put out a little pamphlet recommending conserving a lot of the Osa Peninsula because of biodiversity reasons. And so I realized that there was already some respectful technical recommendation that a lot of the Osa should be saved, and I was already into building the park system in Costa Rica.
What I remember is the map. I remember sitting and arguing and looking at the map for a long time because I'd walked that forest and I'd walked that forest, and so I would have been part of the voice saying, push hard to get this turned into a national park.
No, at that time, no one of the people lived out there talked about a park. People involved in the park would come out there and sort of did little studies, but no one knew what they were up to. And we even, that airfield, if you've ever been out there, we built that in 1974. By we, I mean us group of people that lived there. That was all made by chainsaws and axes and oxen to pull out the stumps and built that huge store that Felix Avial built there. So we were all gearing up. So no one even had any idea the park was coming. But there was no build-up, probably in the government, and that. But to us people that live there, no one even talked about there's going to be a park. It hit us, boom, just like that.
The whole colony around Serena was considered in the sense that they were compensated for their farms probably in the form of buying for them or allowing them to buy other pieces of land somewhere else. But in terms of considered, as the word is often used today, they wouldn't have been considered. They would have been told to leave because they were squatters.
I was a squatter 3 times. We possessed it and we defended it, but it was on balditas nacionales. That's free land. Every piece of land in Costa Rica was squatted, from the time of Columbus. So it wasn't one person going and squat. They get a group of people, so a whole family can go in. It's easy to remove one man, but if it's one man and his wife and 3 kids, sometimes it might be 30 families that squat a piece of land. They go in and invade it,
The biggest challenge was how do you negotiate with 160 families who are scattered all over the park with basically trails to walk into their parcels. Remember, they were land settlers.
And a few days later, what they call the men that took the census, they went out there and they wanted to get rid of us, so they didn't measure what we had. They asked us, how many acres we had of this and that, because they had the money to do it. How many hectares do you have of bananas? How much pasture? How much? So they censused everything we had, whatever it happened to be. They had their chart, their little thing they went by, and then they came up with a price for it and everything else, what your rancho was worth or whether it was a house. So they came with that, and we had a group of our own people, and we said we weren't going to accept it.
Para nosotros se nos hizo triste que nos sacaran del parque porque estábamos muy acostumbrados a vivir en esa forma y a vivir no con lujos. Es que se vivía una vida tan buena porque se lavaba en el río, se cocinaba con leña, se barría la tierra con cualquier escoba, escobas de monte.
Of course, I came many times and met with hundreds of them personally and explained the reasons why the government of President Oliver has declared this a national park, the biological value of this area, and express my terrible sorrow for them, but the unbreakable willingness to go forward with the park and at the same time to do justice as much as possible. I had practiced in Santa Rosa National Park with being humble, being compassionate about the impacts of conservation on the people. And they're just talking with another beautiful human being impacted by a park.
I had a piece of land, so I was censused as a farmer, and I didn't want to leave, but at the end I thought, I don't want them to give me a piece of land somewhere out in the flats. I'm not at that time I was a Highlander. I didn't want nothing to do with the lowlanders. I didn't want to farm, to live out. I had such a beautiful place with the jungle, waterfalls, the Río Claro diving off the rocks into it. It's good rivers, wild country, so there was gold up there also. It's unbelievable. So I had no way did I want to live, with a bunch of neighbors in a civilized area.
So it was to how to feed and move these people, how to get rangers in, how to silence the humans in what is Corcovado today, and all the farmers who were affected by the park, they were all compensated money, checks, big checks.
Well, the people saw those checks. They'd never seen all the money in their life. So all of a sudden, they all left, not all, but many of them went to San Jose and got their checks and cashed it. So it was easy getting the people out. No one fought it at all. And the ones that finally get out of there and living in these little communities here, where they make these prefab houses. You'll see they call it sapo triste. When they make these prefab homes, they'll put like 80 or 100 families there. They build them same house for everybody, same house. Every house looks the same. Your neighbors are the same. It's horrible. I couldn't live in one. They've taken all their freedoms away, because they say that everyone in Costa Rica should have a house. And we said too that, in those homes, all the women are the same, all the guys are the same. So if you come home drunk at night, get the wrong house, doesn't matter. You wake up, oh, you're not my wife. Oh, you're not my husband. So, okay. But they gave these people no real choice, to take that away from them, because we were all, so used to living, free in that.
Ya yo me metí a la montaña y ya yo no era muy montañero. Cuando ese entonces los compañeros los han botado uno en la montaña solo y ellos se venían para Carate, se iban para Puerto Jiménez, se iban para el Tigre, se iban para Cerro de Oro, aquí, y uno solito en la montaña, sin ninguna arma, apenas un medio puñal ahí, y donde hay mucho animal silvestre.
The gold miners, there were only 5 or 6 that weren't censused, that they wouldn't sign up as farmers. Most of the gold miners signed up as farmers, because they got the money. So that got rid of everybody except for a handful in 1975, 76.
The leftover miners, to me, they love total freedom. They usually drink and smoke, and they don't want a boss, and they don't want to work for anybody, and they don't speak English. They don't have teeth sometimes, and their fungus is in their skin. Usually they don't make it, They dig all day, wash all day in the water, and then get a little bit of gold, and usually associated with alcohol and other vices. What the heck? I mean, they're obviously a species in danger of disappearing, the gold miners, because when we created the park, there were only 6 miners. That we made the big mistake of leaving them and saying, well, one of these 6 miners could hurt the park.
We can't go back to the days when innocence was still a choice away. All there is now is a larger faith. We might have time.
Gold has got this, from way back in history. There's just something about gold. People want gold. They want gold. It's the magical form of money. When you figure a gram of gold is 10,000 colones, and you can't make that working all day in Golfito, and there's no work in these other towns either. To make that much money, it's gonna just sensible. A man's gonna do that.
And you can see these very wealthy ladies around the planet wearing gold, and there are gold parts probably in spaceships, and say, "Wait, my goodness. What a crazy species we are." And but we don't know, or we forget that we have to destroy something of the planet in order to wear those golden things, or to use that gold or other metals for that matter. Gold is a terrible thing for humanity, whatever it is.
When the price of gold went up, and I saw that more and more miners and people that wanted to be miners started coming in the 80s. So it got to be, when those 6 miners were in the park, then it got more and more, and they told their friends. So more people started coming in, and then they started bringing their families.
And I said, oh my God, how are we going to solve this? I had tremendous fear. of maybe not being able to cope with our situation, especially putting gold and conservation together, and the terrible economic situation in the country, and the banana company was gone from the south, and the country was in a serious economic crisis, and people kept saying, you know, we need to eat. Yeah, well, everybody needs to eat, but the thing is, in such a rugged area with so many rivers, with so many little watersheds, with so many people in all of them, is this going to be possible?
Only our scars in time will heal. No damage done will go unnoticed here. We've got each other now. Now that the fear has let us go, I'll always keep you near. Keep you near. I won't hide from the truth I know inside. You'll be here to remind me.
When I first left the park in 1976, we needed a place to stay, so we found just a little piece of land right in Cerro de Oro, which had nothing. At that time, Cerro de Oro had maybe 3 or 4 ranchos, literally nobody there. We went in there, I would buy a little bit of gold from the people who came out of the park at that time or somewhere else, but it was absolutely deserted. There was nobody there but myself and pig farmer, Chente Murillo down the way, but the town never did exist. We called it Cerro de Oro, but it wasn't until into the mid-'80s, in '82, when the price of gold got up again, over $200, and more miners started coming back in. And when they came in from Serena, different rivers, they came into that area, actually through what we call the Fila Madres, the ridges, to drop in there, because the reason it was a hot spot, because I had a huge store there. So I was supplying the miners with everything they needed, not just the basic foods. Everything they wanted was at my store. So they came from all over. And then as they found out more miners are coming there, other people started selling liquor. They built what they call Ciudad Negra, just because it was black plastic roofs. And they put a little soccer field in there. And then they played cards there a lot, so they called it Las Vegas. And that was that's where they had, you know, the fights and stuff. Then we had a few, I guess, shootings and killings there, but even the prostitutes came in from there. Yeah. They would come in, some are a little too old for golfito, so they were out there. And the drinking there, they also smoked a lot of weed down there. That was the gathering point. I went a lot at my place, so that was their functioning point, the fights and the gambling. And I had in my store, I sold pills for the gonorrhea. So a woman cost, I think, $300, and to cure it was $500. So they knew whatever they had, you know, whatever happened, they could go to my store. I would take care of them. So that was a famous Cerro de Oro, rip-roaring town, you know, around the weekend.
I came to the Osa in the early 1980s through Golfito, and Patrick didn't make the meeting at the Miramar Hotel in Golfito. So I had a guide who took me across on the ferry, and a dolphin chased the ferry in front of the ferry the whole way across the Golfo. And we landed in Jimenez, and we took a 4-wheel drive over no bridges that I remember, maybe 10 miles along the coast, going through rivers and whatnot, and we're just left off at the side of one of these rivers. And we spent 4 hours hiking up to Patrick's finca, and I believe during that hike, we probably crossed rivers 40, 50 times. Well, what I saw was an environment of wonderful freedom. There was very little law. Again, that has its drawbacks. But the work was free.
One man, I always had the pistol in the pulperia handy, but there was a famous miner called Juan Bravo. He was sort of mean. He killed a few people. But every time he came into my store, late at night, the first thing he would do was pull out his pistol and point it at me. He said, Pat, he'd say, hold this for me. He said, I'm gonna go drinking. And he said, I get a little crazy when I drink. I'll come back in the morning. But it was like him telling me, okay, if I want to shoot you, There's no doesn't matter where your gun is, you're done. And so a lot of people don't think someone should carry a weapon, but it depends on your line of work. As a GoldWalker, I had to have something that what I should say, impressed the people. I'm not paranoid, just in my type of work and what I've done, you don't have to have some kind of weapon.
Se oreaba en la playa, Madrigal, de la Leona para adentro, ahí en la playa. Habíamos 200 personas sacando oro en la playa. Habían ranchos por todos lados. Vecinos todos eran. Faltaba sal, fulana, faltaba fulana, este cabello, y así.
Entonces el grupo que habíamos de oreros, o sea, el grupo que nosotros éramos 8 personas, o sea, el joven era yo porque apenas tenía 13 años. Entonces cuando querían tomar los fines de semana, guaro, entonces me mandaban a mí a la Palma, 11 horas.
There's an old presidential statement that all the rivers of Costa Rica are free for all the people to work with a pick and a shovel. That came from the 1930s. And you could see that there. These miners were free to go wherever they wanted, to use whatever tools and whatever time and whatever intellectual thought process they wanted to try to find the gold, and nobody was in control.
The few killings out there, well, they're more than just a few. The man was killed almost in my house because he touched it. He grabbed another man's bottle, and Claver was his name. He almost took his arm off. The man ran, he stabbed him through the back, because their machetes were like a sword, and super sharp, but also to the point. And when he fell down, he hit him on the leg and just opened him up, and he died there. And all he did was he cleaned the machete on the grass. He said, Ken Siggy, who's next? No, there was probably 10, 15, 20 miners, and none of them wanted to be next. None of them turned him in. So you had, that was it. Don't touch him at another man's drink. That was more or less what it came down to. They have, their little Indo Indians, what is right and wrong.
Patrick was absolutely a legend on the peninsula. Everyone knew his name. Everywhere I went, Patricio. And almost everybody liked him. But he was known to settle scores in a quick fashion when necessary. And so there were those that threatened him. And of course, he always was carrying a lot of money or gold on him, which made him feel like he knew there were always threats, but somehow no one ever attacked him.
I either had $40,000 in cash or that much in gold in my backpack, so it was always that quantity of money. You didn't feel too safe. And I never tell anybody where I was going or how I was going. I'd tell them, I'm going to go out tomorrow. I'd go the opposite way. At that time, we had boats that came from Punta Arenas along the coast, trade boats, so I could hop on one of those and drop off somewhere. So I just tried to keep, that no one knew where I was going. And I tried to keep everybody off guard. And I'd make special markings on trees if I didn't want anybody to follow me where I was going to go. I would go farther than I wanted to go. Then I'd backtrack and come off the trail because I didn't want anybody following. So like when Juan Bravo was going to kill me, I'd say, I was warned about this, not to go past where Juan Bravo lived and that. So I'd bypass his place, and one day I'm walking and he comes off the trail right in front of me. He was working in Piedras Blancas, and they read the book Papillon, or this French guy that was working with him. So this Frenchman had talked to him about, okay, let's rob Pat, or shoot him, or kill him, or whatever, And so Juan, his state of mind said, yeah, that's a good idea. I had to buy gold, I have to walk past that area, so naturally I was always armed. But the time I met him, it was a shock to meet him right on the trail, just front to front, and him with the shotgun. But he was working on his mining claim, so he had a lawyer with him. So it was like, I can't do nothing today. But that was a little spooky. I don't know what chemical imbalance he had, but he would go wild. I've seen him, put guns to people's heads, He shot another man in bed. The man was sleeping, and Juan came up and shot him through the blanket. Just shot him in cold blood. He's just couldn't control himself. Out there was a lot of graft. If you did something, nothing went wrong. If you killed somebody out in the bush, they buried him. That was it. There was, at that time, the body wasn't sent into the Owiho to sent into, autopsy or anything else. Okay, he's dead. Let's bury him. And I remember one man called Don Chanzito, just still to this day gets me. Tears were coming out of his eye, and his hands were jumping. And I said, we should wait, maybe a few more hours. There was definitely something wrong. He had loaned a lot of money to people, and I think that they thought, okay, now I shouldn't say that, but he's passed out. Maybe get him before he opens his mouth. I've never seen that before. They had to tie his jaw shut, so it wouldn't fall open, and the tears coming out of his eye. But the hands were tied together, and the fingers were jumping. So definitely, there was still too much reaction there for me. It didn't seem to affect anybody else. But they buried him. Yeah, it's like, how bad he was, but that was my first experience to see a man, to still have that much movement. No one went to jail either. In those days, it was like, there was all of us out there. I think the police thought, we're all sort of outcasts socially. So if we did something to one another, it was okay, as long as we didn't go outside and do anything. And that was it. There's a graveyard in Playa Madrigal I would like to not dig up, but remark all the graves from the gold miners and people that died out there. Snake bite, okay, you're dead. There's no reason to ship your body in, spend all that time to tell what happened. Okay, you were buried. That was the end of your life. Like I said, one less Indian, one more tamale. That no one ever was any, remorse over it. Your time is gone.
When I was doing fundraising in the States, and this was beginning to grow as like a cancer in Corcovado, the Park Service here was very confused as to the real impact to the miners in Corcovado. So, if you have gold miners inside a protected area, and they have to kill the rivers to get the gold, because the gold in Osa is not in veins or caves. It's pretty much up there in the hill when the river was a few million years ago, or down here where the river is today. You either have to make trenches and deviate pieces of the river, or you have to wash up the side of the river, and all that tonnage of dirt is coming towards the river, and it starts filling up all the little holes in the rocks. So it starts turning the river into like a cemented river. So you kill the life of the rivers, and you don't create a park just for the macaws, for the big animals. A park is for the entire biodiversity and even the marine life. Our guess is that some of the parts of the rivers may even take hundreds of years to be restored, and the park is dying.
You could run, you could hide from the truth you know inside, but I'll be here to remind you.
De que el obrero tenga el chance de ganarse el pan de cada día. ¿Cómo? Dándole chance que trabaje a pala, a pico, a barra, a canoa, a terzano. No bomba, está bien. No bomba, no manguera, está bien. Pero que no dejen. Pero ellos no quieren eso. Entonces, ¿qué vamos a hacer nosotros? Y nosotros tenemos que ir a buscar la bolsa de arroz. Y sí. Y para ir a buscar la bolsa de arroz, y tenemos que meternos al parque. ¿Por qué? Es la única manera, es la única parte donde hay un poquito de oro. Ya Carate ya no. Carate los dejó muy rebatidos las compañías.
Por ejemplo, teníamos un túnel, como éramos 8, una cuadrilla de 8 personas, teníamos 4 y 4. 4 trabajábamos en un túnel y 4 en el cauce del río. Y cuando nos tocaba el túnel, yo era que me gustaba con el carretillo del material desde adentro, 75 metros de profundidad hacia afuera del río, donde ya los poníamos en canoa para procesarlo, lavar el material. O sea, es un proceso, ¿no? Sí, pero es un trabajo duro porque a veces el túnel es muy bajito y hay que uno pasar agacho. Yeah.
The gold price actually got up to about $800 an ounce for a short time and then fell down. But it stirred up so much activity, and they were all mining, so that brought in mostly Canadian mines. The Canadians really mined. At one time, they had almost all the heavy machinery in the whole country. There was nobody working on the roads with these tractors and different big heavy machines because they all were over in Rio Tigre in this area mining. There was that much gold.
So I had to come back to the country and face that very difficult operation. I contracted a team of the best scientists I could, with Dan Johnson and others, who came and gave me a report. In a month, they came back with an 80-page report, which made me cry and cried of guilt a little bit, you know, because I was out of the nation fundraising, but more probably crying with terror, thinking of the decisions ahead. How do you move over 1,000 miners out of Corcovado?
So there I was, biologist in the field, doing my stuff in the forest, and I get this, a forgotten telephone call or letter, probably a radio call in those days, from Alvaro in San Jose. And he said, Dan, would you be willing to go to Corcovado and do an environmental impact statement, and I mean that literally, environmental impact statement, on what the gold miners are doing? And as a favor to a friend, I said, well, okay. So we all went and flew into Puerto Jimenez, got out of the plane, and I asked Gerardo, take me to the gold miners. This is the place where all this is. So we march into the camp, I look around me, and it took me 15 minutes to decide that, well, I can write the environmental impact statement, but my reaction, I happen to be in this camp of people, so what? What's the point of an environmental impact statement? The damage is obviously trashing all the rivers. So I took the personal decision, as in retrospect, that's what field biologists are inclined to do, is to study the gold miners as though they were another animal in the forest. So that changed the whole nature of why we were there. The turning point was the day, probably the second day, when I'm standing out there in the mud, literally up to my armpits in the mud, asking questions of this guy while he's working, right? And I say to him, do you know you're mining gold in a national park? Now, I'm a very idealistic biologist at that time, right? The national park, well, of course, nobody would want to damage a national park, would they? So, do you know you're mining inside the national park? Oh, yes, sir. I said, where's the boundary? And so he gives me a detailed account of where the boundary is, over that rock, up the top of that ridge. And that's when it began to impact on me that there was no park presence anywhere. No signs, no nothing, no visits, no people, nothing, no conflicts. I mean, you know, there just wasn't anything. And the guy's talking to me about what he's doing and explaining all this, and he says, but he's not doing any damage. He says, I'm not hunting, I'm not cutting down trees, you know, I'm not doing anything to the park. And I said, do you remember the river here before you started gold mining? Oh, yes, sir. And he describes it to me, crystal clear, full of crabs and fish and shrimp and algae and plants growing in it and the flowers on the edge of the bank. I mean, you know, he had a perfect description. And I said, you remember the shrimp? Oh, yes, sir. And he tells me that they're this big, right? And I said, you remember? I said, for the third time, I said, and you remember the shrimp? And then he stopped. And you can see the wheels turning. And then he said to me, looked me straight in the eye, and he said, but sir, there's a lot of shrimp in the ocean.
Oh my God. This is going to be such a big challenge to solve that I thought it was bigger than the challenge of creating the park. And there were so many of them, and they were so violent in speech, at least. Some people used to say, you come around to us and we'll shoot you. and they were so determined to stay there. And I was nervous for a while to go to Osa, but I was in charge of the park, and so it was my feeling that the gold miners were destroying a national park and they have to leave the park.
We did walk into the park, which was dangerous at the time. We would come upon a place where miners had built a rancho and had plastic on the roof of their one or two small buildings, so to speak, and nobody would be around, and we would find hot food on the table because they heard us coming and they ran off into the forest so that they wouldn't be arrested by park guards. So it was a moment of uncertainty. This was obviously a legal activity. It was all being sorted out at that time, and we represented a great threat.
Para nosotros fue chocante cuando nosotros nos toca ingresar ya a hacer el censo y empezamos a tener problemas. Mucha gente que estaba dentro del parque, al darse cuenta que nosotros lo único que andábamos haciendo era tomando nombre, y la gente que estaba allá en el parque, los obreros, se dieron cuenta de esa situación y trataron de asustarnos.
The wonderful phrase that Patrick taught me was, El río es mi patrón, the river's my boss, and his law was a gram a day. At that time, that was about $10. They were pulling at least $10 a day out of the river each. And when you multiply that times 1,000, 2,000 miners, they were building an economy because that was a market.
It all relied on the gold miner, everything, because the banana company was going broke or leaving the country. So the prostitutes, third-generation prostitutes from Golfito, they'd go to Puerto Jimenez. They know that there's the money. You know? And the gold miners were just free spenders. They wanted to spend that money as fast as they could, drinking. And there was so much gold too. It was just a rip-roaring town, Puerto Jimenez was. And they would drink and fight all weekend. You know, that was it.
The peak of this whole thing was, we discovered at the time that I can't remember, was the Banco Nacional or the Banco Central, but one of the two banks set up an office in Corcovado to buy the gold. We talked about a way of legitimizing the gold miners. I can't think of a better way to do that than that.
The saying was, the park is for free, the park is up for grabs, but the only thing that kept me going was, I have to believe it's possible or get out of the way.
No, los obreros no nos quieren a nosotros. No. Es más, algunos nos han amenazado de muerte. Sí.
When I made the final decision to evict all miners of Corcovado, to do my best to evict all gold miners from Corcovado, the government was dragging its feet. Elections are coming soon, so a lot of decisions are postponed because that was going to be quite a big storm for the nation to evict so many people that didn't want to leave a park, and that was something new to the nation, etc., etc. So no, that full year was totally no backing from the government.
I would hear the word internacionalista and nacionalista being spoken. They were angry that the park was being created for an international purpose and not a national purpose.
Y mucha gente, muchos guardaparques vinieron por 3 meses, porque nos enamoramos de la zona, porque nos gusta, porque la llevamos en el corazón.
Es bueno un parque nacional, sí, claro que sí, pero que le den una concepción a los obreros.
I was completely blind to the social resistance. I found myself saying, oh, we've never asked, how do you keep society from invading the wild area? There was no presence, there was nobody doing anything with it, it wasn't producing anything for society, there was no employment, nothing. I mean, it was just fair game.
And plus the people, when the guards do find them, they say, okay, we'll come out with you. And they know that nothing can really serious happen to them.
Camina 10 horas uno con una persona, lo trae, el fiscal le hace una indagatoria y lo deja que se venga. A veces han llegado ellos antes a Puerto Jiménez que nosotros. Y ahí nomás vienen y otra vez están adentro.
the thing is, too, the police here don't figure it's a crime for a man to be working and get arrested. They have so much problem with your dope dealers and thieves and robbers and muggers and everything else. They go, oh, I brought this man in because they caught him working in the park. It's not, in some of these police, it's their families and they mind before too, so they don't really consider it a crime.
Because I didn't use violence. I didn't tell them my rangers were going to shoot them or arrest them. I said, no, it's the law in Costa Rica that is going to deal with this. And so I stopped dealing with the government and went to the judges. I don't care what the president said. It's the law what counts. We're not in a dictatorship.
Pienso que las leyes son muy flexibles contra los que cometen ilícitos dentro del parque. Sí. Eso es una de las cosas que a nosotros como guardaparques no nos agrada mucho. Sí.
And I gathered all as many miners as possible, I think it was near Madrigal, and they were expecting me to tell them that my rangers were going to take them out of the park at gunpoint. And I said, well, I won't speak much. Maybe you win, maybe I win. But know yourselves that as of right now, your name is in the hands of the judges in Golfito. And that began a clear course of action. And the judge came and said, everybody out, and forced the government, who was dragging his feet, to act. So I didn't come down with the police. I just came down with the law in my hand.
Pero al principio sí, estuvo fue difícil para los guardaparques, porque ellos salieron, algunos sí no querían tal vez salir, porque ya tenían muchos años de vivir en el parque.
Then I left the jungle in 1986. Yeah, I got rid of my business and got all my children out of there. The reason I finally left because the government removed all the gold miners from the park. So that killed my business, even though they were on the outskirts and that, but my store and all my business was centered right where all the gold miners were. I mean, I got kilos of gold. I bought up to 8 kilos a month.
The real gold in Osa is green. It's not gold color. And I think the people of Osa know that very well by now. And so I think there is a better future for an Osa poor family today than it used to be back then. If I had allowed, or if the government had allowed farms to go on in what is Corcovado today, it would probably look like Haiti today. Ruin, clays, soils, floodings, no wildlife, and poverty.
Such free and beautiful nature is a dream to be gone, but to keep this land pure against man's quest for gold, we must strive to tell a story and let history unfold. Tell of farmers slashing, burning our forests to the ground. Some treasures need no mining or cultivating of land. Just take a look around you, it's right where you stand. In the name of yellow wealth, green gold has been forsaken, but the fight to save our resources has only just awakened, and the sun will rise.
About meeting Patrick was to find this world-class adventurer, this person who lived a life that was uncanny and courageous and dangerous at all times, because he always had money and gold with him. And I really admired that about him. He brought a certain sort of middle American farm culture honesty onto the peninsula. And he had a wonderful, had a wonderful sense of humor that allowed him to accept the Tico way as natural and acceptable, the uncertainty of things, right? And yet they accepted him because he accepted them.
Yeah, I wish I would have written more stuff down that they told me. I have a lot of things, but to get that together, because they, to me, were a very important part of that peninsula. The old, simple, just hard rock miner.
Who is right and who is wrong will be decided by those who are strong. Not the laws of the jungle or the land, but by the will of the people who rise up and take a stand. I am hurt, I am scarred, I will flaunt my ugly slashes to show that I am strong, and I will rise out of the ashes. I am beauty, I am nature, I am balance, I am complete. I will fight and I will find all the cracks in man's concrete. La la la.